Who are we without our stories? Civilizations have risen and fallen, and we are left with myths. The stories that show who we are, what we once believed, what we believe now, what message we wanted to impart. Across our world we have people from every colour and credence that resonate with the genre of grimdark. All of us, even you, watching right now, banner around this modern mythological storytelling. But what is it? What are the themes that make a world grimdark? What is the essence of grimdark stories? Come with us down this rabbit hole. Let us try to define the themes, the tone and the myths, and perhaps together we can understand these fantastical nightmare worlds we lose ourselves in. So let's define grimdark.
So let's start at the beginning. What is mythology? Well, mythology can be defined as the study and interpretation of often sacred tales or fables of a culture known as myths, or the collection of such stories which deal with various aspects of the human condition. Where ancient myths often depicted humanity's struggle between the forces of good and evil, mostly through the lens of the fantastical, for example, using gods and monsters to convey the varying degrees of one's morality or strife, the modern myth, in this case Warhammer 40k, subverts the expectations of said myths by removing the hurtful nature of the mythological tale. The primary themes of the myth are as follows: fate, pride and hubris, heroism, justice and vengeance, and hope. These are running themes throughout mythologies originating from different cultures, and there are ideas borrowed from Egyptian and Greek mythology, as well as religion, that are rampant within 40k. However, for much of this section, I'll be primarily focusing on Egyptian mythology due to my choosing of the subject of analysis, Horus. It is easy to see the mythological themes conveyed in 40k, and alongside them are the references to the Bible. The Imperium's zealotous nature, namely the ecclesiarchy, is a highly dramatised allegory to the Latin Church, being that it is essentially the sci-fi equivalent of Christendom, but dialed all the way up to 10. The Black Crusades, as we all know, are a very important part of 40k lore, and the name itself was adopted from the Christian Crusades launched way back in 1095. We could view the Astartes as the quote-unquote noblemen of the Christian army, and all of those below them in stature as the drafted peasants, and the many imperial worlds as the countries which fell under the banner of Christendom at that time. This would make Terra the Holy Land of Christendom, the Warp, of course, Hell, and the many Xenos races the enemies of Christianity. But that's only one way which we can view the Imperium. The other would be to view Terra as heaven, with God, in this case the Emperor, sitting upon the throne of creation, guarded by his angels, the Custodes. This would make the loyal Primarchs, the Archangels, the Space Marines, the lesser angels of heaven. Those subservient to the Archangels or the Ecclesiarchy could be seen as holy warriors, and those above the Astartes as prophets or priests. Both of these are viable viewpoints, and each of you, I'm sure, interpret this in your own way. Now, while the biblical references do not far exceed the Imperium, the Gothic is a major influence in Grimdark as a whole. Where most would be able to see the Gothic influences would be in the Imperium's architecture. Mankind's mother tongue literally being named High Gothic, which derives much from Latin, which was also a very common theme in Gothic literature, and the strong religious symbolism that accompanies both. But perhaps the most understated yet important themes derived from Gothic fiction are the fascination with mad science, death, human nature, prophecies, and the so-called purity of religious folk. Warhammer 40k is no stranger to conveying the darker side of human nature. The Astartes Traitor Legions, or Traitor Guard, are primary examples of this. Through chaos, the true nature of humanity can be explored through the use of metaphors, and is presented as selfish, brash, cruel, and power-hungry. These sinister motivations have been and will continue to be explored throughout the 40k lore. Correlating directly to the Bible, the Imperium is also a great tool to explore humankind's strife and themes of religious extremity on a massive scale. The Imperium explores all of the aforementioned themes heavily. There are many parallels to be drawn from the character of Horus, as all of these themes are present, so let us explore Horus's character so that we can achieve a better understanding of how these themes can be and have been transferred into the universe of Warhammer 40k. The first parallel to be drawn is the obvious one: Horus from Egyptian mythology. In the mythology, the sky god Horus was tasked by his mother Isis to protect the people of Egypt from Set, the god of the desert, who had killed Horus's father Osiris, the king of the gods. Following Horus's many battles with Set, both to avenge his father and protect the people of Egypt, he became known as Lower Egypt's patron. Osiris brought civilization and safety to the people of Egypt, and Set, his brother, resented him. When Set's wife Nephthys seduced Osiris by changing her image to look exactly like Osiris's wife, Isis, Set became enraged and thus killed Osiris and usurped his rule. Osiris was revived by his wife Isis, but was cast down to the underworld. Before this, though, Isis used her magic to impregnate herself with Osiris's seed, and that baby was Horus. He was raised by Isis to be a ruler and to bring peace and prosperity to Egypt, and after many grueling battles with Set, Horus restored the kingdom and fulfilled his destiny. Later, the eyes of Horus would come to represent well-being, healing, and protection. Ultimately, it is a story of hope. Hope that one's predicament can change, hope that peace will eventually be attained, and hope that they who rule are on the side of the people rather than against them. But in 40k, instead of restoring the kingdom, Horus sets out to bring its ruin. Instead of his eye being a symbol for awareness and prescience, it becomes a symbol for corruption and betrayal. Horus in 40k acts as both the opposite of the Egyptian Horus and as Set, a destroyer and usurper who seeks to destroy the kingdom's ruler and remake the kingdom in his own corrupted image. This is the perfect subversion of the myth, as it perfectly conveys the evident mythological inspirations on 40k as a whole, and also sets the tone for the entire Grimdark genre. Now, if we view the Emperor of Mankind as the allegorical figure to the god of the Christian faith, only in status rather than as a creationist deity, then it falls to reason that the Primarchs are the allegorical figures of the Archangels, Horus being the Imperium's parallel of Lucifer, and the remaining traitor Primarchs being the 8 kings of hell. In the same vein, Horus's rebellion could be seen as 40k's equivalent to Lucifer's, and it proposes the idea of what if Lucifer won? Well, as we can see in 40k, the death of, or rather the undying vegetative state of the Emperor, led to mankind forming a death cult. Bereft of direction and reason for being, it fights itself just as much as it fights the forces which seek its annihilation, and could ultimately lead to the destruction of the entire race. In this regard, perhaps Horus hadn't failed in his endeavour at all, and sowed the seeds for the Imperium's ruin.
Our stories, our myths, are there to convey a message through themes and tone. Grimdark presents itself as a subversion of our world's myths, creating its own unique vision. But what makes a subverted myth grimdark? Let us start with the tone, that blanket feeling that ties together the various works of fantasy, sci-fi and horror that wear the banner of grimdark. There are many fantastic examples of a light tone of grimdark in many pieces of fiction, such as Joe Abercrombie's First Law and the Shattered Sea trilogy, to Mark Lawrence's Prince of Thorns. For an expression of this tone, we will use George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire as our example of the theme of grey morality. George R.R. Martin talks about the importance of external and internal evil, and the different battlegrounds that war is waged on. We as humans like this struggle to be definitive, black and white, and us versus them, because we are often the heroes in our own journey through life. When you read or watch The Lord of the Rings, the beginning of fantasy's modern myth-telling, It is that very struggle of light versus dark that draws us in. We are living this story through the lens of heroes such as the Fellowship of the Ring against the Dark Lord Sauron, the antithesis of evil. So simplistic and yet inspiring. When you watch Aragorn, an almost perfect moral man, charge at orcs, or when you see the ride of the Rohirrim at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, something within you swells. It is us, the light, charging in with the power of righteousness, defeating evil, represented by orcs, enemies that are not even human, who have no redeeming qualities about them, who serve evil and want to indiscriminately destroy the world. A world where the societies of elf, man and dwarf and hobbit are places of cooperative peace that are only threatened or upturned by external evil. It is a twist on this easily digestible form of evil that resonates one of the most defining tones amongst works of Grimdark, the greyness of morality. The world of ice and fire is not as clean-cut as the examples of Tolkien's work in its representation of who is good or bad, light and dark. We join this world and soon find it embroiled in a war of 5 kings, a conflict that draws in thousands of ordinary people over the squabbles of noble families. In the universe, it is referred to as the wheel, as it does not matter who is on top. Those that are below still suffer. Each side and family commit deeds that are a mix of good and evil, and we find that good and bad people are on all sides of the conflict. In the north, the Great Wall, designed to keep out external evil, leads to a millennia-long war against the wildlings, just people trying to survive. The Starks unjustly lose their father Ned to the Lannisters, leading to a rebellion that would see thousands of innocent people die in battle, sieges and banditry. Even when we move the story to Daenerys, a journey that leads to the noble goal of liberation, it still leads down a path of indiscriminate vengeance. We despise those who kill, hurt and enslave, and it feels like justice when Daenerys crucifies the nobles of Meereen. But later we find that innocent people got caught up in the self-righteous punishment. George R.R. Martin shows us that the heroes of these myths are prone to the mistakes and failings of normal people. That as people, there is no complete dominance of light or dark in each person, as a sum of them evens out to different shades of grey and moral ambiguity. In the modern myths told through Grimdark, I've always felt that draw too. Its more grounded and realistic take upon morality. Even amongst the fantastical and magical tones of a grimdark world, it finds a way to rationalise these otherworldly things and bring it into the bubble of reality. Morality, people and their actions they take in this universe with more black and white nature, often seems polished, like they're aware of their mythological status and their words and actions seem artificial.
They will answer to the King of Gondor.
When I see this scene of Aragorn claiming Andúril, the reforged Narsil, it is a moment straight out of a mythological hero's journey. Even charging the Black Gate, a moment when Aragorn seems to transcend humanity and becomes that immortal, powerful hero cleaving down evil. Compared to the betrayal of war in A Song of Ice and Fire, in the Battle of the Bastards, it begins to mimic that immortal hero facing down a horde of enemies. Music is swelling, blood is pumping, and then we are confounded with the realities of conflict. It is brutal, pain and dread. Being on the battlefield is not always a glorious place, just men killing each other. Even then, soldiers do not meet a glorious end. Ran over by your own men, bleeding slowly whilst men scream for their mother, the defecation, drowning in the mud and slop, passing away slowly in a field of pain and misery, unremembered. Our rose-tinted glasses are removed in Grimdark stories. It is a more realistic approach to the world in a way that presents these myths and stories in a deconstructed way. In fact, when the last seasons of Game of Thrones aired, we saw the deviation from this realistic approach. It became closer to the very themes and ideas it was opposing. You most likely consider yourself a good person. You've probably never done anything egregious and strive to live a moral way. When we witness these stories, we live vicariously through the heroes, believing that we are righteous and moral people. Grimdark takes us away from you. In reality, heroes are never truly the paragons we wish they were. In those situations of great danger and moral ambiguity, we probably won't be as brave or just. In truth, we are not good people, we're just people, grounded in a realistic and mundane world. Our story is no great mythological origin, it's just another story in an ocean of them. We have seen the light touches of themes shared by Grimdark and some other genres of work, but there are stronger characteristics that truly encompass the feeling of a grimdark world. The pit, the darkness, the black dog are names for that feeling of being drowned in an unforgiving, bleak and dark world. Diving into pieces of work that proudly wear the banner of Grimdark, you find the world in which the characters we follow a truly horrific and oppressive place. Something we find in the far future of Warhammer 40k, cyberpunk, and yet also amazing pieces of art such as Berserk by Kentaro Miura. The world of Berserk is a terrifying one. The concepts of noble warriors and just kings of Tolkien-esque fantasy are completely gone. This is a world of abject poverty, where common folk murder, backstab, assault and plunder just to get by. Where kings are lecherous and villainous, and queens are plotting, scheming puppet masters working from the shadows. Children are slaughtered brutally, and their reanimated corpses are used to attack their families. Apostles turn children into fairies, to lure more children away from their families. The whole world often seems balanced on a knife's edge, ready to tip into outright chaos and destruction, and in the background of all of this, greater demons called the God Hand are always looking for a way to break into the human realm. Effigies of them can be seen with times and areas of extreme suffering, evil and darkness, as they get closer and closer to breaking out. Gone are our perfect heroes. Guts is not some hero destined for greatness, quite the opposite. He is someone who should have died, but due to some wavering in causality he survived, but is now damned to fight for his life every night and day against creatures of nightmare, and at the end of his journey there will only be death, as due to the eclipse event his soul is damned to hell regardless of what he does. This feeling of bleakness blankets nearly everything, a feeling shared by the dystopian hellscape that is Warhammer 40k. Mankind had set out to the stars. We spread across the galaxy and achieved everything we ever dreamed of, became the paragons we were destined to be. A golden age came, and then we lost it. We almost destroyed ourselves with artificial intelligence. The long night descended, and the Federation of Man starved, and we fought amongst ourselves. Our last great chance came with the Emperor, uniting humanity across the galaxy, but that failed too. For 10,000 years humanity has stagnated. We are left with the Imperium of Man, a corrupt, bureaucratic, oppressive, religiously zealous place. Life for a majority of humanity is awful. Most live in hive cities, some never even seeing the light of a sun, surrounded by brutal crime, oppressive authoritarian governments, choking smog and predatory cults. The religious zeal of the Imperium is a sickness within. Worlds are burned on the mere suspicion of misinterpretation or blasphemy. Most only have the escape in the form of the Imperial Army, a service where your life literally doesn't matter, as millions of men and women are thrown at abhorrent aliens and demons. The enemies that the Imperium faces is a terrifying concoction of Xenos that butcher and maim, like human life meant nothing. Just as with Guts and Berserk, there are some unfortunate enough to have to face a constant inner war. Psychers. For those that are connected to the warp, they are haunted by demons, invading their dreams and giving no rest. Humanity is plagued by the powers of the warp. the direct manifestation of our worst emotions that have coalesced into dark entities that seek to destroy us. The universe, and most importantly, humanity, is in its worst form, reflecting that oppressiveness in its art, the architecture, just the very way people speak to each other. It screams of a time when the best days are behind us and our daily life is hell.
A universe of pain, darkness, and bleak existence are the facets that create the tone of Grimdark. But what transforms it from a depressing world state to true Grimdark is horror. Grimdark relies on fear to generate much of its tone. Fear of the monster, of the creature, and of humanity's lonely strife amidst infinity. We are forced to confront these things lest we succumb to fates unfathomable to most. These are primal fears shared by everyone, and Grimdark stories contain many elements of external horror presented in ways both fascinating and terrifying that are reminiscent of cosmic horror. Enter Genestealer cults. Going back to its youth, we experience the grimdark future through space hulks and hive cities, incredibly cramped and decrepit places, home to the Genestealer infestations. Genestealers represent the grimdark interpretation of the mythical hero's journey into the monster's lair, but they're more cosmic horror than one may initially think. You see, Genestealers are to Tyranids what the denizens of Innsmouth are to the Deep Ones, byproducts of a genealogy not meant to be combined with human DNA, for the outcome is something terrible. Man-beast hybrids forced to live out their existences in servitude to thankless beings. But if external evil wasn't frightening enough, the true horror of a grimdark world is the evil inflicted on the inside, usually under the banner of religious zealotry, a link to its gothic origins. The Imperium of Man, the side we should rally for, are responsible for some of the most haunting fates in the universe. For the simple crime of being a heretic, you are hardwired into the front of a war engine, fully exposed to enemy attack, relying only upon the Emperor's judgment to keep you safe. Fiber optic neural connectors and chemical injectors are implanted into your brain and spine. As you cry out in your pain-induced frenzy for forgiveness, chemicals flood your mangled body as you beg for death, a chance for the Emperor's forgiveness. So much of the horror in heavy grimdark stories are portrayed as the torture of your inner self, because the most horrifying scars are the ones on the inside. As a subversion of its mythical origins, the Emperor of Mankind, Osiris, the Abrahamic god, a being that should be the epitome of divinity, is terrifying. To be in his presence is akin to standing next to a nuclear reactor. You'd be a dead man walking, as the supposed divine being literally drained your essence away. In Grimdark, the heroes, to use the term loosely, are fighting against the bleakness of a dark world, so horror becomes the loss of your essence, your dreams, your defiance, and your future.
In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But when we hear that iconic phrase, do we really take in the gravity of what it implies? It is the grim dark future, a place that is filled with reference and examples of subverted mythological stories. But the past has been told so many times that the people of the past become the heroes of light and dark. A place where our obsession with death is expressed in every facet. A future where we feel lost as humanity, take part in some of the most heinous crimes in the galaxy against our own people. A place where the true misery of war is shown and all those who suffer from it, not shying away from its cost on people of all ages. A future where your daily life is a nightmare, not from any external threat but from the oppression created by a corrupt authoritarian regime. A place where the dream of a quick death is laughable, unobtainable due to the horrors that the galaxy has to offer, where our gods are nothing but soul-hungry oppressors, where our greatest fear is the damage that can be inflicted on the inside. This twisted combination of myths, themes, and tones create a grim dark world, depressing almost. But do we leave it there? Is this the extent of what makes something grim dark? For in all this darkness, how do we, you and I, lose ourselves in these worlds? What is the essence of these stories that we resonate with so much? Endurance. In a grimdark world, there is no true hope. Our heroes will probably not survive the hellscape that they live in. They will be battered, terrified, and will bear the scars forever, but they endure. When we put the headphones or book down and detach from these stories, we are left with that feeling. A grimdark world is an awful place, and yet the people in these stories endure. They are defiant. In real life, we aren't heroes. We don't really get the defeated, evil, glorious ending where we achieve everything we dream of. We just continue in our normal, unremembered lives. A grimdark future is many more times visceral and horrifying compared to our own world. So if people can endure that, maybe we can endure our world too. That is the essence of a grimdark world. To show a mythological place so horrible that you find the strength to endure.